Hello and welcome to OTIP Podcast. We're here to talk about, well, not really watches this week, but we are talking about time and some very good ways to spend it. My name's Felix Scholz, and with me is...
Andy Green, as always. How are you, Felix?
I'm pretty well. I'm very into this week's episode. It's a great one. We've got Jason Heaton, the man, the myth, the diving legend, back on. What's he talking about?
Yes. Well, he's as we know, he's a watch writer. He's done a lot of work for Hodinkee. He's a photographer. He's an avid diver, and now he is a published author.
Yeah.
So we've got Jason coming on to talk about his new novel, Depth Charge.
Yep.
Which is going to be very exciting. We actually have a bit of a competition as well.
Oh, yeah. So I think the best way to get Depth Charge, and we would very much, we've had a little read of an extract, and obviously we've chatted to Jason about it, but we can't think of a better way to spend a Sunday afternoon than reading it, as well as supporting Jason, who's a lovely man. Best way to do it is to buy it yourself. We'll link up his site and the usual sort of Amazon marketplaces in the show notes. But there's another way to get your hands on a copy, Andy.
Yeah, there is. I should just say depthchargenovel.com is where you can get it.
Yep.
All those copies, I think, are going to be signed by Jason, but you can also get it from Amazon. So if you do want to get a signed copy or you want to go on the running to win a second signed copy, what you can do is enter a little competition we've done with and we've organized with Jason. So here's the deal, Felix.
Yeah.
And this is going to be revealed very, very shortly once we get chatting to Jason. But last year when we had him on, you made the joke of you should name an evil henchman after Felix.
Did I say evil?
You said evil henchman, and it turns out Jason did.
Yeah.
And he's got a pretty important role in the novel. We've only read excerpts. We're waiting on our copy, but he does have a very important role. So here's the deal.
Could you say he's an anti-hero henchman?
I don't have enough information, but just going based off the Scholzes I know, definitely evil. So, first of all, what you need to do is obviously follow Jason Heaton, his novel's Instagram, depthcharge_novel, and of course, ot.podcast on Instagram. Yep. And we're going to do a post on there where you can leave a comment on what watch you think evil henchman Felix Scholz
Well, we don't know if it's Felix Scholz. Let's separate Felix Scholz from henchman Scholz.
Okay, all right, that's one and the same to me. But yeah, have a think about if you were henchman Scholz. What watch would you be wearing?
I've got an example. This in case you're not sure of the concept. My FK Scholz has liked Jason Heaton, Depth Charge _novel, and OT podcast.
You're in the running.
I'm in the running so far. I've hit the post, and I'm going to comment. I think much misunderstood henchman Scholz should wear a Hublot King Power 1,000 meter dive watch.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and you're the best person to pick the watch for your kind of evil alter ego.
Let's get Jason's input as well, maybe if he's
maybe we'll get Jason to feed in on the comments. I mean, he can pick the winner.
The final select. What about you, Andy? Can you imagine henchman Scholz wearing something?
Yeah, I imagine him in a Panerai submersible Gold Tech, 42 millimeter case. Yeah, you see where?
Gold.
Gold, bit of treasure hunting going on with the the modern technology that titanium DLC black bezel with the case back and sort of rubber strap that it comes on, and 42 because it's he's out there delicately hunting for gold or maybe knifing his captain in the back.
Who knows what he's doing? I mean, is he hunting? We the plots. Jason's been very secretive about what it's all about.
Well, the book's out. Some people have finished it. We're waiting on our copy to be FedExed over, but I only ordered it yesterday, so it should be here very, very soon. Depthchargenovel.com. We do have a lot of legal terms and conditions and stuff like that, all of course sorted out. Best answer is going to win, so it is a game of skill, Felix. I think we can basically ship it anywhere. I don't think there's any issues.
The values. Well, actually, we'll get it to you wherever you
I think it's priceless. I think it's a priceless prize, so it's a hard one to quantify.
First edition signed copy of one of a future award-winning author's breakout hit.
Well, I mean, if honestly, like I said to Jason, this looks like it's going really well. My order number's really high, and he said he had to do a second order, not even halfway through the day it dropped. So
printing order.
Yeah, so first editions could be collectible in future.
He's retiring. He's bloody the next Jeffrey Archer, except without the legal issue.
Who knows? But it's going to be exciting, and I can't wait to have a chat with Jason. But
Before we do, I've been
yes.
doing something else.
Oh, what's that?
Felix Scholz, not henchman Scholz. Let's make that distinction. Had a look at some dive watches the other day. Some of the new Tag Heuer Aqua Races, which are very, very cool. The titanium one in particular is lovely. And one thing that I'm not actually the watch I was going to talk about, but the titanium Aqua Racer with the green dial, which I'm sure you're all over. It's really cool because the ceramic bezel has like a radial brush, which is unusual, and it's just a nice little Sousson on top of the whole
So
package.
the Aqua Race has been updated this year, right?
Like yes, that's
new case.
Yes, slimmer case, new dial designs. The Cyclops is now internal on the crystal.
6 o'clock.
Flat. It feels really nice on the wrist. Like it looks from it's still a 43mm dive watch with that. Hang on, how many octagonal or 10? I don't know how many sides that bezel has. It looks very, very similar, but on the wrist, it feels a little bit sleeker, a little bit nicer, a little bit more refined. But that's not the watch I was going to talk about today. I was going to talk about another sleek and refined Tag Heuer that just announced last week. Tag Heuer Monaco limited edition for the Grand Prix de Monaco Historique with a very nice graduated green dial. Are you across this one?
I am, of course. I have a Google alert on for green dial watches. Tell me about it, though.
You'll have been overwhelmed this year then.
It's
just really nice. It's the first time they've ever done that particular type of dial on a Monaco. It's a 500-piece limited edition, Aussie price 9,650, and I had a quick check before on the old Tag Heuer website. It says it's out of stock. I suspect that means it is only available in boutiques. But perhaps it's been sold out already.
Maybe. I mean, 39mm case, of the Monaco is very wearable. It's a good looking watch. Maybe.
Yeah, and it's just sort of that really like in some lights it looks very black, in others like you get a really sort of reflective, shining emerald green sort of. It's a really interesting dial. And the Monaco, they always play with dials really well. Like it's such a sort of design oriented dial, that square shape, those those two registers, and you can do like this. The last year had silver dials, like bead blasted looking silver dials, completely different watch in feeling to this. Like this is sort of really, really smooth and really mysterious, and I like it. But I don't know. That's just my waffle on the Monaco. Have you been up to anything or?
Well, do you know what I've been up to, Felix?
What have you been up to?
And we should have mentioned this at the start. I've been talking to some of our friends at WatchBox, Mike Manjos.
Mike, how's Mike?
Mike. So Mike does the market wrap for WatchBox on their YouTube channel. He's and he works for the business. And he came on to have a chat about sort of the commercial side of Watches and Wonders. So I caught up with him. You weren't there, hence
I'm genuinely interested to hear what the chat was. Were there any mic drop moments?
Why don't we just hit play and find out? Today's episode is brought to you by WatchBox. WatchBox is the world's leading platform for buying, selling, and trading pre-owned luxury watches, fueled by technology, innovation, and unmatched global experience in the high-end watch market. Today we have WatchBox CFO and veteran trader Mike Manjos, who's famous for his market wraps, where he dives into the watch market in detail and other trade news. Mike, how are you going?
I'm doing great today, Andy. Thank you so much for having me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure, and we thought it would be a great time to get you on off the back of Watches and Wonders, digital world first, launching most of the big watch brands and small watch brands' new releases. How did you find the digital experience on a whole?
Well, it was kind of surprising to me because obviously we had a lot of time for build up. We've been looking forward to this, for months, since there was, no more big shows for, I don't know, maybe 30, 35 years. I've been going to Basel and, it was the highlight of the year. And when we heard about the full digital show, obviously I was a little skeptical, but I thought they did a wonderful job managing it probably as best as possible, being an all digital release.
And what about the trends that you saw in the new releases? Was there any sort of common themes that you could kind of pull out?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was obviously, it was definitely a green year. It was getting to the point where I was getting a little annoyed with like everybody having a new green dial. But, the watch companies tend to do this. They kind of move in a pack. But there was certainly a lot of incremental improvements from a number of brands. I don't know if there was as many like major groundbreaking changes. I think more it was a lot of small improvements. I mean, Rolex kind of made that process perfect, and they always have done that approach. But I think we saw it from a lot of other brands where, there was nothing really crazy, but just a lot of things that you went, yeah, that's better, that's improved, I love that, I can see where they were going. And, it was just so much to digest that I'm still finding things that I might have missed the first week.
Yeah, I think that's definitely normal. I know I certainly am, where you kind of just go, oh, that happened. Oh, this is different with this new watch. But really curious, obviously predictions is something you talk about a lot. How did some of the big brands releases stack up against what you're expecting?
Well, I think, the biggest, obviously the most interest, probably because it just is the biggest brand, is Rolex. And, for months, everybody was doing predictions on Rolex. There was a lot of buzz on social media, a lot of interesting mock-ups done by a lot of people that obviously have way more time and talent than I do, because they just made up some wonderful things. And, we saw a lot of predictions, I think, easily expecting the new Explorer 2, which we got. I did expect the new Explorer, obviously a little different than we expected. But, the thing that I think moved the market the most was the Daytona. And, lots of speculation about platinum going away, green going away, and even the steels being changed. And it didn't happen. So I think the most interesting part of the show was, the build up for months ahead of time and just watching the market move at a crazy speed on pricing wise based on rumors, and then having it not come true, and then seeing how the market now reacts to, what did happen and didn't happen. Obviously some great introductions, but again, nothing groundbreaking, but a lot of people were of that, oh, Rolex didn't do anything, but this is what Rolex does. It's all incremental little improvements. And we saw a lot of that. I think the other one that was probably the most interesting to me and that we talked about a lot was Patek Philippe, because over the last year or two, it's been all Nautilus and all Aquanaut all the time. And we were really hoping for, updated Calatravas, for some new pieces in the dressier side. And they really knocked it out of the park, in my opinion. The Calatrava was everything. I was begging for a hobnail bezel to come back. I think I was the only one who cared, who thought Patek should have that. And they did it in a new size and a new movement, which, I was always a little critical the last few years of Patek, like using the same movement for the last 30 years. It's like, come on, guys, all these independents are making spectacular movements on shoestring luggage. You guys should be able to step it up. And they really did step it up.
And I think on that point, it sort of, you mentioned the size, and this sort of feels like they made the movement and then made the case to kind of fit
for the first time, doesn't it? I mean, it was really, you're exactly right. I mean, they knew what they wanted to get to and built the movement to make it. And that was always a criticism we heard, and it was rightfully so. The other thing that I loved that they did was, they built I think to me, 39 millimeters was the perfect size, definitely a little beefier. They did a colored dial, which I was wishing for. I love the old Calatravas with colored dials. But then they also changed the price point fairly dramatically. I mean, they didn't make this 1,000 or 2,000 more. They went to the next level, which I think is a smart move because it's repositioning Patek back to where it belongs. It's like, we're not, a run-of-the-mill brand. We are Patek Philippe. We are priced accordingly, and I think it was a great move. They did it both in the Calatrava and that linear perpetual, which I think was my favorite watch of the show. Anybody who's been to the museum remembers the pocket watch with that great calendar. It's just iconic. It's beautiful. The movement's spectacular. Platinum micro rotor, and then to me, again, the right size. It's definitely big for a Patek, but that was always my complaint. Is I have 3 Pateks. I don't wear them much because I'm so used to my Rolexes and my Panerais and I like bigger watches, but this was a nice balance, I think, in between.
And on Patek, I know we chatted just before around the 49471A, which, steel 38mm watch bracelet that has an annual calendar and moon face, sweeping seconds. Not a whole lot more on retail than, say, a Nautilus is. What do you think of that as a release?
Well, I mean, again, I was looking forward to annual calendars as well. Now that they got rid of 5146, they got rid of 5905. There's a hole there for sure. Mm-hmm. And when I first saw it, I was like, wow, that's awesome. I don't remember them ever doing the steel annual calendar. We used to do the steel 5085s, power reserves, very cool on bracelets. And then I looked at the number and I was like, they're calling that a ladies at 38mm, which I found fascinating. And the first thing that popped into my head was, we're going to see more down the road, because obviously annual calendar is one of the most well-known complications. It's certainly thought of as a Patek complication. It makes perfect sense that we'll see an expansion of annuals, maybe a 6146 we see this summer. Because I think the other thing that most of the brands learned during COVID was that, multiple introductions over the year really keeps the market engaged. And, there's no real need anymore, now that we're doing this virtually, to do it once a year. And if you're able to get the limelight in the summertime with a, cool, maybe we get a ladies aquanaut in a pretty color for the summer. And then maybe we see some annual calendars in the fall and then a big complication right before the end of the year. It would make perfect sense to me. And I think we're going to see more and more brands really kind of stagger out these launches, whereas Watches and Wonders was great. But one of my concerns going in was I thought some of the smaller brands might get overlooked. And I think that did happen to some extent because, it's hard to compete with Patek and Rolex when they're doing new and out.
I mean, yeah, 100%. It's sort of Rolex, Tudor, Patek, and then you kind of wait and see where the dust falls. And
yeah, they suck the air out of the room, naturally.
Before we talk about the sort of the smaller brands and the independents, I'm sucking the air out of the room. I want to talk about the Audemars Black Panther piece. In terms of timing, they kind of released their watches a few weeks earlier, which was probably a deliberate move to kind of get that cut through the noise. Yeah. And then they came in like a wrecking ball with this Black Panther watch. What do you think about that and the brand's direction in general?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, Francois and the brand Audemars, I have great respect for. But he's always been a little bit of a rebel. He made the big move a couple of years ago to kind of get rid of distribution and take it all in-house, which was a dramatic move when they made it. Not being part of the whole group.
But probably set the trend as well, in a sense.
Very much set the trend. Definitely. He's always been a trendsetter. You have to respect that part of it. He's forward thinking and he's always looking at other alternatives. The launch pre-Watches and Wonders, I thought was kind of predictable because it wasn't very significant. Again, it was mostly green. So, he started us down the road here. But putting the Black Panther in the middle of it and having it be such an audacious piece and done, do the charity thing, doing the big launch. I think it was kind of trying to get the spotlight back, and that's not unusual for Audemars. They like to make the big splash. But I think it's a fascinating case study in, what was once a traditional brand is really not anymore. They are very much not traditional, even in their traditional pieces, just the way they operate. And I think it's healthy for the business. I don't always believe in it. It was a little wild for my taste. I'm kind of a conservative guy. I'm a Lange guy. I'm a Patek guy. I'm a Rolex guy. I like some of the APs, but you're not going to see me wearing a Black Panther around. But it was very interesting for the industry, and I think in the end healthy because it got everybody talking even more.
Yeah, fantastic, and I agree with you. Sort of, I've said it a few times now. I think it's just sort of an extreme novelty, and I also think that it's okay to have these more radical brands out there. Like it's not offensive to be doing something at a high price point at a really high level of execution that not everyone likes. It's sort of healthy, as you say.
Well, I equate it to Richard Mille lollipops.
Yeah, exactly. exactly. A couple of other kind of clear winners in a probably more commercial sense, given we've got you on the line here. RWC and Tudor were two brands that really stood out to me in terms of aggressive pricing and packaging for kind of that 10 to 20K, well, I should say 5 to 20K price point. What did you think of IWC and Tudor's releases?
I thought it was, I was struck exactly the same way. I was very impressed. I think, IWC made one of the best commercial moves of, taking an iconic piece, the big pilot, and making it the not so big pilot. Obviously, I love that design. I like big watches, but it's not the easiest watch to wear, in the original size. And I think just downsizing that to a level that's super commercial but still iconic was brilliant. The other piece I thought they did great with was, their new pilots with the bracelet and the strap. The interchangeability, I think, is great. The price point and value, in my opinion, those pieces represent some of the best value in the industry. I do love IWC for that. And I also still like the steel perpetual blue was a great piece. I mean, I could have lived without the shock absorber. It wasn't really my taste. But I do think they made a great commercial move, and also to get a little more attention. I feel like in the last couple of years, some people have taken their eye off the ball and forgotten how good of a value and nice pieces IWC does make, because they're really not that flashy, but I thought they were great.
Yeah, I agree. I think last year we saw the Portuguese sort of 40s again, shifting the size down. With that came a bit more of a reasonable price point. To me, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, it was sort of indicative that it's a brand that's acknowledging and paying attention to consumers, consumers that are saying, maybe this is priced a little bit aggressively and these pieces are a little bit too big for me. I love the design. I love that they're iconic, but they're a bit too big and they're not wearable. And to me, it's a brand that's gone, okay, give us a couple of years, we'll deal with this.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I mean, I think they've done a very nice job of doing it gradually, but still keeping the DNA of the brand. And I think that's what I love about, all of these brands that I look at. The first thing that hits me is like, is it their DNA? And I thought they did a great job with that. And then Tudor was, to me, one of the best launches. There's a couple things I love about Tudor. One is the goods literally hit the stores the next day.
Yeah.
And something about that I just love. I guess maybe because 30 years I'd spend, going to Basel and then 6 months later going, what did I see 6 months ago? I still haven't been delivered.
Yeah.
So that just hitting the stores immediately is great. I was expecting the new chronographs. I thought they did a great job with those. I was certainly not expecting sterling silver. I mean, it is in person one of the prettiest pieces you will see. And I mean, an amazing value. And now you're already seeing them on the market at over retail, which, I got to imagine they couldn't be unhappy about. And then the gold piece was quite a shock. Again, green, but, a very pretty green. But to have them come out with that price point and really, say, hey, we're here, we're Tudor, we know we can justify this price point. I think it's a great move for the brand overall. And over the last, I'm going to say 2 or 3 years, they've really gained traction. I mean, I remember the days when, Tudors were basically, a poor man's Rolex.
Yeah.
And they looked exactly the same. They were just, a third of the price. And now they've evolved into a real brand that has an identity. It has a look. It's a great value. I mean, you cannot argue with the quality and the value. And I think they really came out of this very strong.
It's really fascinating that you say that, and sort of I've really thought about the 18-carat Black Bay 58 a lot, mainly because of the price point and being a really big Tudor fan and owning a 58 and owning other, the original Black Bay and plenty of vintage Tudors. It's a thought. The thought has crossed my mind of like, oh gee, wouldn't it be cool if Tudor did a gold sub or a gold piece, because you would know that it would be better value than say a Rolex dive watch in full precious metal, and they've done it, and then it had me looking at other precious metal sort of dive watches. They're really aggressively priced against brands that are like Omega. Like it's I think it's
like Omega, like Panerai, like any of those brands. They certainly do stand out, and the quality's there. That's the other thing I love. I mean, they just the fit, finish, the execution of everything they've done is truly impressive. And I mean, you don't. It's just a strong brand right now, and we're very happy to, be active in it. It's fun.
Yeah, they did a really solid job. Did you have any other sort of more personal favorites? They don't have to be commercial.
Well, I can't help myself. I am probably one of the biggest Lange junkies. So one of my predictions was we would need to see a new perpetual calendar. Not many people noticed that, they didn't have a perpetual calendar in the line, and it's kind of a very classic complication for a brand like Longa to have. I thought we might even see it in maybe the Odysseus case, but they brought it out in the Longa 1 kind of style.
Stunning.
And I was very surprised by that because, obviously they had done the Longa 1 Tourbillon a few years back, and it was a very expensive piece that was, very modestly successful because the price point was a little strong for all of us to feel. But this perpetual, doing it in the great size, doing it in colored dials. For years, Longa had kind of gotten away from doing colors. And, everything was that silver. It was a little boring on the front, and you'd flip it over and be like, oh, my God, this is gorgeous. But the front was kind of dull. And they did a great job, I think, bringing the two colors and then that pink gold dial. And the limited edition is just amazing. I thought the triple split with the blue dial, again, just a great piece. I don't know how wearable a triple split is, but it's a really cool thing. And I'm a real sucker for Longa chronographs. I just think it's the most beautiful chronograph in the market. And right from, all the variations, I love them right through. So I thought they also did a great job. And, we're very active in the Longa market, and I've seen a big move in the last 18 months in the secondary market. And we're continuing to see that as more people are realizing that, the quality's there. They were just never the best marketers in the world. And the value is there compared to a lot of the other brands in the market.
Yeah, I agree. You kind of look from afar at the way pre-owned prices are kind of going. And I mean, there's still a lot, in my opinion, and I'm sure it's yours as well, but there's a lot of value to be had in the Longa brand. And, if you look at sort of what's happening with some of the other independents, you can only expect that it's going one way, which is going to be up.
Yeah, I think so too. And again, and it's interesting you bring up some of the other independents because, we always try to follow them. I mean, they did, I think, get a little bit overshadowed. I mean, I know Moser did a couple of great dials that I thought were very impressive, but I didn't really, again, my eye was mostly on these bigger brands. And I think, unfortunately, for a lot of people, that might have been the way. And, one of the things I'm going to do in my next week or two is try to sit down and go, okay, what did we miss? Because I'm sure there's plenty of great pieces that we missed.
Yeah, well, I think, to think of an example, Ming have got I think their first sort of pre-order window on a new release, which, they're doing to kind of combat their demand of just selling out within moments. So they've said, from X to Y, we've got a order window open. Everyone that gets an order and gets a watch, and sorry to everyone else who's not paying attention to their emails. And again, for a smaller brand with a huge amount of demand, I found that really quite interesting. Right.
I love that story. I love that whole, situation because it's really turned into a little bit of a cult.
Yeah.
And I love that. And I think the fact that they're doing these very creative things at a very good price point, and have a very loyal following, but have totally broken the mold on the old distribution systems. I mean, I think the biggest change that we saw in COVID, besides, the world being digital, is I think a lot of brands are also realizing that they can talk directly to their customers now and need to talk directly to their customers. And for years, all they wanted to do was talk to the retailer, and the retailer would talk to the client. And now that's all blurred. And I think we're going to see over the next 5 years, I think COVID pushed us forward 5 years as far as online activity, certainly here in the States. I mean, everybody realized that we do all our shopping now online. There was no need to go to stores because you couldn't. And I don't think that's going to go backwards for a while. Yes, there's a great experience going into a retail store. But I don't think there are as many great retail environments as there need to be. And I think the digital world is going to really supplement that over the next few years. And I think brands like a Ming and some of the smaller, limited production, if you're only making a few hundred watches a year, do you really need a distribution network? Or can you reach directly to those collectors and clients and really make much more of an impact that way?
And make more money as well.
And exactly. Well, it's also healthy for the brand because, again, think about, the infrastructure they need to have a distribution network that's not really necessary if they can connect directly to their clients, and the clients have a better experience. I mean, it's funny because we're all on social media, and like I see the Moser brothers and the Grunfelds, they're all over the place. And you can talk to them all the time. It's great.
I find that really interesting as well from a business perspective because it takes a lot of pressure off off these young brands or smaller brands, and if they can go direct to consumer, they can sell probably a third or a quarter of the volume of watches that they would otherwise need to kind of keep the doors open, and they can kind of experience success in a different way. And my opinion is when you don't have the pressure of sort of, oh, maybe we need to do a quick 200 watch limited edition to get some cash in the door because we've had a bad 6 months or bad 12 months, you start making better long-term decisions. And I think that that's a really interesting position to be in as a brand of kind of, we're ticking along. We have really healthy margins here. We go direct to the consumer. And, even if we have a boutique, even if we run that boutique, we still have healthy enough margins that we're not sort of discounting every, other watch that comes through the door. We're maintaining full price, and we're kind of, fostering these great relationships with customers.
Correct. And I think their other thing is the smaller quantities actually help feed the success of the brand, because like as well as I do, is these collectors who, I can't get one, then I'm going to go to the secondary market, then the secondary market boosts up, then more demand is created for the new goods because the secondary market's so strong. So it's really a self-fulfilling, trading environment that we're living in right now, where supply got taken down quite a bit, and demand went up. So suddenly it just kept feeding itself. And, some of it gets a little crazy, I think. I mean, I'm not a fan of, $100,000, three-hand Nautilus.
Yeah. Silliness.
I mean, it still makes me crazy. I'm like, you could get a perpetual chrono 3970 for less, right? Just wondering.
You can do a lot. You can do a lot with six figures.
You can do a lot with six figures. That's not a steel three-hand Patek that used to sit in the case 3 years ago at $18,000. Just saying. Wow. And I love Patek, but I don't think they even like that part of the market, and they might have made it worse with doing a green dial limited edition 5711.
They definitely did. Well, Mike, thank you so much. And speaking of the pre-owned market, we should mention when shopping at thewatchbox.com, you can enjoy guaranteed authenticity, 2 years warranty, and free express global shipping. So whether you're in the market for a new watch or looking to sell, maybe even trade, hit up WatchBox today at thewatchbox.com. Buy world-class timepieces with confidence and convenience. Mike, thank you so much for joining us today.
Andy, thank you so much for having me. It was great fun.
Fascinating, Andy. That was a great chat with Mike, and I think Patek need to do something with their reference numbers, because I do not have the most feminine wrist out there, you would say, but I would wear that steel animal calendar in a second.
Yeah, it's funny. When it first came out, we were like, it wasn't even something that occurred to me that it might be targeted at women or females. I just liked it, and I thought the size and proportions would work for anyone. So, really interesting.
Fascinating.
But good to catch up with Mike, and thank you, WatchBox, for supporting today's show and hooking it all up.
What are we going to do now, Andy? We're just going to sit around, twiddling our thumbs, or are we going to get some underwater explosive action happening?
I think we need to get the sat phone out and call Jason Heaton.
From an undisclosed beach.
He's routed it through 3 different satellites, so we really don't know where he is.
Yeah.
Felix.
Andy.
Today we have the Minnesota Redford himself, a man some say is personally responsible for the reinvigoration of the Bundstrap. He's a watch guy, gear guy, and when he's not exploring the hard-to-reach crevices of the world, he's driving or maybe he's diving. But more recently, he's also an author. Jason Heaton, welcome back to OT the Podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on, guys, and coordinating the time with me. It's about 8 o'clock at night here, so it's not too bad. You guys are in the middle of your weekend.
Yeah, and I think this is a very, very good way to start a weekend. Well, to end a weekend, I suppose. It's Sunday here. Speaking to you is always a pleasure. And this time we've got a bit of a purpose. Usually we're sort of fairly rambly and, we talk about watches, whatever's going on. But you've written a book. What has possessed you to leave the comfortable world of short press release write-ups and investigative watch reviewing and go into a proper novel?
Well, so actually about 10 years ago, I had started another novel. I think I always had an ambition to get back into creative writing. I had dabbled in it years and years ago before I got into professional tech writing and all this other stuff we've all been doing for the past decade or so. It was the fall of 2019 that I was kind of hopeful for something to come to pass business-wise that didn't. And my wife and I got this news while we were on vacation, we were actually fortuitously at Ian Fleming's old estate, Goldeneye, in Jamaica. And I got this email came through, and I saw it, and I was kind of disappointed. And I was like, screw it. It's time. I mean, I'm just going to take this open bit of my schedule and start the novel that I had started 10 years ago, kind of scrap that and start over. And right there and then, sitting by the side of this lagoon off the Caribbean, we just started brainstorming plot ideas, and it kind of took off from there. So it's been what, 18 months or so from that point to where I'm at now, which is almost entirely complete.
Amazing. And so we should mention the novel's called Depth Charge, and we have had the pleasure of sort of reading a couple of pages early that we're gonna talk to you about shortly. But what was the biggest sort of I guess challenge in coming up with that idea and kind of saying, I want to do something creatively, I want to come up with a piece of fiction?
Well, other than some short stories and some poetry that I wrote back in some creative writing classes in college, I hadn't really done any fiction, especially long-form fiction. In fact, this novel comes in at about 60,000 words, and I think just the sheer patience and persistence that it takes to sit and write and continue to revisit the same story for that length of time was really daunting and really challenging. And I think, the idea of kind of cooking up a full story with enough twists and turns and characters and consistency throughout it still daunts me. I mean, it's really difficult to do. And also there's this sense of, I'm way outside of my comfort zone. I think, doing watch and gear writing and some adventure writing in the 3,000 word range for the past 10 years or so, I kind of felt confident every time I sat down to write something like that. But to start with a novel that I've never dabbled in that space, there's this sense of like, are people going to like this? People like my writing in other areas, but are they going to buy into my story? Are they going to just think, wow, this guy's a real amateur, So, I mean, that remains to be seen, but we'll find out. But, whatever comes, it's a dream that I wanted to fulfill for many years, and I did it. So, even if it bombs horribly and I'm left with a stack of, 500 books in the basement to give away as Christmas gifts,
nice.
Who cares,
Yeah. I certainly want to ask you about it. This is, sort of a personal, professional interest, like how you go about writing it, and how I can feel that sort of anxiety of putting something so big out there in the world. But before we get there, can you tell us a little bit what sort of book are we going to expect from Jason Heaton? Are we going to expect literary romance fiction, maybe some hard literature with, I don't know. Tell us what can we expect?
This is definitely not a bodice ripper, as some of those are, and it's not Ulysses by James Joyce. It's somewhere in between. I actually think, even though I got an English literature degree in school and university, I think it sort of ruined me, because then it seemed like everything I read after that, every work of fiction that I read after that, I'd always be looking for hidden metaphors and themes and things like this, like I had to in college for coursework. And I don't know, I've never been a big thriller reader. I think, a lot of people will go on vacation, they'll bring a stack of books, so they'll pick one up at the airport, or, sit on the beach with a book. And I didn't get into that fully, but when I did, I've read all the Ian Fleming, the Bond novels, and some of the Clive Cusslers and some Alistair MacLeans and things, and that's what I'm going for. I mean, it's a light lift, but I also like thrillers that make you go down rabbit holes. Get onto Google and search something. I think Fleming was particularly good at it. He would bring up very specific types of cars or boats or guns or watches, and it makes you, when you're reading it, want to research or look into the history of interballistic missiles in England in the 50s or whatever it was. And Cussler was the same with different historic shipwrecks that he was talking about, or that sort of thing. So I tried to put a strong historical element in it, that and enough sort of technical detail when it comes to the diving. Of course, there's diving in it, to keep people interested beyond just good guy chases bad guy and gets the girl and drives a fast car sort of story. So that's where I kind of land on it. It's definitely a thriller. It's a paperback. It's the kind of book that I want people to take on vacation, or sit on the beach or sit on the dock at their cabin in the summer or something and read it. So
yeah, very cool. Can you kind of tell us about the plot a little bit? From what we've read, there's a bit of a flashback, quite a detailed flashback scene. Can we expect like a split timeline? I guess, yeah. What's an overview of what we can expect?
So the book is set largely in present day. I have about 3 or 4 chapters that are flashing back to, and the relatively short chapters that go back to the 1940s during World War II, and it's set mostly in Sri Lanka. So it's my wife's home country. It's a place I know fairly well, and I think my own experience of being a Westerner, being somewhat out of my comfort zone when I go over there to South Asia, is obviously in this book in some respects. But on top of that, my hero, whose name is Julian Tusk, and he goes by the nickname Tusker, that was a name that his best friend gave him when he was in college, is there doing some specific work. He's a maritime archaeologist. And while he's there, something horrible happens to his best friend, and he's trying to figure out what caused all this. And that leads him down a path where he's in very unfamiliar territory, meeting, some fairly dangerous people, and doing some pretty dangerous stuff. It's very deep diving. And then there's this historical element that I tried to bring in with a bit of World War II history, and hopefully something that a lot of people don't know about that was actually going on during World War II. And a main sort of set piece of the novel is this shipwreck that had been found off the east coast of Sri Lanka, and it's actually a legitimate piece of history. That was actually a ship that was sunk by the Japanese on the east coast that has never been found. And so I wanted to sort of hypothesize that the ship has been found, and it has this incredible secret that kind of the whole story then revolves around. So that's kind of it. There's a love interest, of course. And I think, rather than do kind of the stereotypical, quote unquote Bond girl, I really wanted to make the woman who is kind of the romantic lead, if you will, act as almost a little bit more confident and even stronger than my hero. I think you don't see that much nice. in a lot of the books that I've described. So, I tried to make her kind of the stronger character when she shows up in different scenes. And I think that will add a little bit of a different element to it.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. And look, it is very well, researched from the sort of snippets we've read, and there's all that sort of historical detail. And as you sort of just mentioned, it is sort of based around a real life shipwreck. That's not sort of, the only real life tie-in that you have. It's not completely fiction. There's a henchman, it seems, called Felix, which, look, when we first had you on, maybe 9 months ago, Felix did make quite a strong play for an evil henchman position in the novel.
Did you get the check, Jason? That
I'm still waiting for the wire transfer. Yeah, right.
It's on the way.
PayPal sent, right?
Who's paying who in this arrangement? Yeah. Tell us about Felix.
So, it's one thing I have loved about writing fiction is that you can invent an entire world with different characters inspired by real people. You can get back at people, in real life by putting them in a compromising position in the book. No, that's not you, Felix. Don't worry. You can live vicariously through your heroes, through your characters. Be more handsome, be braver, be stronger. So I really kind of enjoyed that. I don't know that people will recognize characters in the book, but I did base most of them on actual people that I've met, whether that's it was a little too obvious to use like a watch brand CEO as my arch villain, because I think they're almost like,
but hypothetically speaking,
I mean, I don't know who's listening to this, but like, couldn't you picture George Kern or Reynald Eichelman or something as like this?
I mean, looking at Reynald
guy stroking a white cat.
I'm pretty sure he is a Bond villain.
Yeah. I mean, pick any one of them. Jean-Claude Biver. I mean, it's like they're all just like perfect. But in this case, it was not that. And I'll be curious to see if anyone does recognize who my villain represents.
You realize you've just compromised that little thing at the start of the book. Any coincidence to characters living or dead is purely coincidental.
Actually, this could be genius marketing for you, though, because you could just, like we get that message out there, and all the watch brands are going to freak out a little bit.
And their PR department's got to buy several copies just to make sure.
That's your 500 copies gone. Yeah. There's only one way to find out. You're going to have to read.
Look, I'm very fascinated to see what happens to Henchman Felix and what his plot line is. I hope that he has a surprising moral turnaround and becomes a hero of the day, as is only appropriate. But that's not the only Australian link in it. Like, again, we've only read like the first few pages, but already there's a little bit of Royal Australian Navy. I think it's okay to say that tie-in.
Yes. Yeah, sure.
What for any local listeners? How did you go around sort of working out how to include localized content? Like, are you familiar with the Australian ship that you reference, or
Fremantle was the vampire? I think.
Yes, it was. So the elements that involve different places around the world, and there are a few settings. The book is largely set in Sri Lanka, which fortunately is a place I've visited numerous times. But there's a bit that's also set in England, in Scotland, in Michigan, which is a state just a couple states over from me here in the U.S. There's a very small bit that occurs in Portugal. So quite difficult, but what I was able to do was, my original intention was to get on a plane. We had a trip planned to the UK last spring that obviously got nixed, as well as a trip to Sri Lanka. And I had really intended to visit some of the settings of the book and just kind of get a feel for it and, pace out different scenes and kind of look at the logistics of what I'm writing about. But obviously that wasn't possible, and I didn't want to just keep delaying the book until I could actually visit. So, through the help of both Google Earth and some real subject matter experts, I was able to, let people read certain chapters or certain passages and kind of give me reality checks on different characters, different settings, different places, the history. There's a strong religious element to the book, sort of a bit of religious fanaticism involved in the book that I wanted to make sure to get right. That's obviously a very hot button issue.
Sure.
Whichever side you're on. So I've got a good friend who's a bit of a religious scholar who I sent a couple of chapters and had him give me feedback. The flashback chapters in England, I consulted with a British historian who read through it, et cetera, technical diving experts and things like this. So I'm sure there will be errors that people will catch. I hope not, but inevitably there's always something. And then of course I take liberties. I mean, in some cases you just you make up a building, you make up a location. The Royal Australian Navy bit is, the specifics of it are, I would say, minor in the book, but obviously the ship itself looms large. So it's I think I did okay there. That's legitimate history, the blurb that you guys read. So
yeah, cool. I want to sort of ask, like you're sort of talking about, you've had to I assume fire up Google Maps a fair bit to get a sense of place in sometimes, and reach out to your networks. Yeah. Aside from the research side of it, what is your writing process? Were you very because this is so different to your, I guess, day job writing, how did you go about it? Did you get yourself in a different frame of mind? Because of was it a perfect timing having the COVID pandemic to shut you in, or was it a bit challenging?
For me, it was a really good year to kind of embark on this. My wife was working from home. We were homebound. We weren't traveling as much, kind of on watch press trips or diving trips or whatever that could be a bit disruptive. So I was able to focus. One thing I have a problem with is when the weather is nice outside. I mean, here we have 6 months of winter and 6 months of summer, basically. And it's like when it's nice outside, you just want to be outside all the time. And it's light till 9:30 at night. And, to sit in my office and like look out the window at a nice day, I want to be in the garden or on my bike or driving around in the Land Rover or something. And so it's that proved a little bit difficult to kind of discipline myself. But, when I first tried to write a novel 10 years ago, I'm not sure that I was ready to do it. And all I did was I sat down and I had this very vague notion of how it was going to start. And I just started writing from the beginning, and I got 50 pages in, and it was just a disaster. I had no idea where it was going to go. I hadn't laid out the plot or diagrammed anything or outlined it or anything like that. And so I scrapped it. But strangely, I used that first about 2 pages of that attempt, and it's actually the start of my last chapter in this book. So I was able to repurpose that. Yeah, it is weird, but I think as far as process goes, I'm still a bit of a seat of the pants writer. I kind of always have been, whether it's nonfiction stuff, the gear, the watch writing, etc. But this forced me to, get out some, literally big sheets of paper and a pencil and just start doing like flowcharts and diagrams about, especially timelines. It was difficult because, with the flashbacks between the 1940s and the present day, and then even within the present day timeline, which is most of the book, some of it occurs in 2 different parts of the country. And so, who's doing what where and how many hours ago and which day it was. And that proved to be probably the biggest challenge. And, my wife, Gashani, and I we'd sit down and literally draw out a timeline and then say, nope, that doesn't work. That doesn't work. That doesn't work. It wasn't Friday. It was Monday. It was
the internal logic of the book had to make sense. For
yeah. And I think I've actually, because I'm in this phase now where the book has been edited and then I did rewrites and now it's in the middle of, or actually close to the end of proofing, I've had this kind of time on my hands where I can't do anything to the book. So I decided to kind of start sketching out a second book. Oh. And same hero, very different setting, different location, different plot, of course. But this time I'm going to do it very differently. I think, I'll do my best to sketch it out on paper and do some timelines and some, I don't know what they call them, bubble diagrams or whatever, they're called, and kind of connect the dots before I actually start writing so that I'm not having to wing it or do major rewrites, 9 months later.
And what have you sort of, learned along the way in writing it about yourself? And has it clarified anything you do, or has it sort of forced you to confront anything about either how you work or how you think about things?
I think it was easy to professionally slip into a false sense of security based on kind of quote unquote success I'd had in the watch writing space. And I think it's really valuable for anybody to get outside of their comfort zone and attempt something new and something a little bit scary. And I think, I'm at a time in my life when, as I'm getting older, my ambitions lie less in, climbing mountains or diving new shipwrecks. And it's a bit more of this type of thing where, having never written a 60,000 word piece of fiction and then putting it out there, it was quite frightening, and it's been quite exhilarating. And I think it's something I encourage anybody to do, whether it's, write a novel or take up a new sport or just a new career. The other thing that was kind of interesting too is along the way I spoke with a literary agent. I talked to a couple of publishers and some authors, and the big decision for me along the way was, do I seek a traditional publishing route or do I self-publish? And I always had this notion that self-publishing was kind of kitchen table, like, okay, anybody can do it. You're just putting out schlocky kind of junk and whatever. But like, what I came to realize along the way was that, everything I was doing from the marketing to finding a printer, working with a designer for the cover layout and the marketing materials and typesetting, and then finding an editor and a proofreader, all of that is what is the type of work that you're paying or that a publisher will take a cut to do themselves. And of course they have a big reach. They can reach into bookstores and libraries and set up press events and that sort of thing. But, why not do it myself? I've had this nice, 10 years of kind of networking and meeting, people like you guys that are kind enough to have me on your podcast, or, build up, 20,000 people on Instagram that are interested in the book. And, it's kind of, I keep telling people, like, nowadays you can be whoever you want. And I mean, you guys are prime examples. I mean, you've started this podcast from scratch. You can do it largely for free to start out with, and then it's just up to you to kind of build something out of it. And it's the same with these, YouTube stars or podcasters or bloggers or whatever. And that's kind of the way I view it with a novel. And it's been such an exciting new adventure.
Yeah, amazing. And I imagine there's some pretty serious upside. It's the same with music. It's the same with everything. You keep that control, but if it goes well, then you kind of directly benefit. And I think that's an important note to kind of focus on just quickly for people listening and people wanting to support you. This is a tremendous amount of work, and to buy a copy is going to greatly support you. Yeah,
no, I mean, I'd be greatly appreciative of anybody that wants to take a chance on me and read it. I mean, I realize that, I have a lot more respect for, a lot of these people that we see going back to kind of the world that we know well, and that is the watch world and all of these micro brands that I can't imagine what a heavy lift that would be to start from scratch and, design a watch on a napkin and source people to make it and then try to market it in a very crowded field. Hats off. I mean, I think, and the people that support those brands and are loyal to them, I can see why they're so appreciative. I mean, even in the past year, kind of ramping up my outreach and my marketing and setting up an Instagram account for the book and seeing the people that are excited to read it has been really encouraging and amazing. So
we can't wait for the rest of the book. So hopefully we'll order a few copies as soon as we can. Let's say it goes really well. Maybe it's a bestseller, top 10. Are you going to get that lunga you've always wanted?
It's funny. I was chatting with James Stacey yesterday, and he asked me this hypothetical question about if you had X amount of money, which watch would you buy? That you would plan to wear at least once a week, or I don't know how he phrased it, but I really had to think hard. I mean, I can't think of any specific watch goal that I have at the moment. We constantly see, especially this week and next with Watches and Wonders and the Omega releases and whatever, and it's like there's no end to the beautiful new stuff that comes out. But I kind of feel I've reached a point of equilibrium. I don't know that there's much else I really kind of want. I mean, I keep coming back to the same 5 watches, that I just wear day in and day out. So
that's a pretty good place to be.
It is a good place to be, yeah.
Now, I know we discussed if you wanted to treat us to a reading of a section, perhaps some sort of, I don't know, action-packed cliffhanger, or if there's any bodice ripping, please, you could maybe just make it up for us. So maybe we'll either, if you wanted to send that over, we can insert it, or if you wanted to do it on air, so to speak, feel free.
I cut out a bit of an excerpt. I could read it right now, and I am planning on doing an audiobook version of this book at some point because people have asked for it. And I'll tell you right up front, what I've found really challenging, and I haven't quite solved this yet, is I listen to a lot of audiobooks. I love audiobooks, but some of the narrators are incredible, and they do all of the accents of all the people in their books. I can't do, I can do maybe 1 or 2 accents fairly well, but I'm not going to attempt an Australian accent, a Scottish accent, a Sri Lankan accent. I mean, it would just be comical and insulting, I think. So, and I don't want to be offensive either. I mean, I think some people, just don't want to get it wrong. That's not a Scottish accent, that's a Welsh accent or something, So I've kind of come to the decision that, and this excerpt I chose doesn't have any speaking lines in it, but I've kind of decided I'm not going to attempt the accent. So I hope people will be okay with that with the audiobook coming out. But with the audiobook, I've actually already started recording each chapter as a separate audio file, and then I'll get that edited together. But so for this excerpt that I'll read now, obviously it's not pre-recorded. So if I stumble or something, everyone will have to
everyone will understand.
Cut me some slack.
Yeah, sure.
The Zodiac bounced across the light swells, following the coastline. The two men in the depth charge's rigid inflatable said nothing to each other, even as the sound of the motor raised a nearby school of dolphins, which arced out of the water as if to play. Scholz glanced at their silvery backs and then turned away again, training his eyes forward. To the west, the Batacaloa lighthouse stood impotent in the dark, its light long since extinguished. The man at the back cut the outboard motor, and the boat coasted to a sloshing stop. The only sound now was the distant roar of the surf breaking over the sandbar at the entrance of the lagoon. The handsome white cruiser lay at anchor ahead of them, about 200 yards away, a single white light atop its cabin illuminated for safety. Scholz, perched at the bow of the Zodiac, was almost sure no one would be aboard at this hour, but he pulled a night vision scope out of a black duffel and scanned just to be certain. He tossed it back in the bag and nodded to the man at the motor, who wore a thin black rash guard of the type tropical surfers wore for sun protection. But here, in the wee hours of a Sri Lankan morning, he wore it for a different reason. In the humid air, his face glistened with sweat. Scholz, who was wearing a black 2mm hooded wetsuit, pulled on a pair of Scuba Pro jet fins and spat into a diving mask. He rubbed the glass with 2 fingers to keep it from fogging, rinsed it in the sea, hoisted an aluminum scuba cylinder and harness onto the Zodiac's gunnel, secured his mask, bit down on his regulator's mouthpiece, and back-rolled into the water with only a small splash. He'd done this sort of thing before. Bobbing to the surface, he held up the large bubble compass strapped to his wrist. He aligned the lubber line with the white boat in the distance, then signaled to the other man, who lifted a large roll-top dry bag from the bottom of the Zodiac and handed it over the side. Scholz sank out of sight. After a few seconds, a trail of bubbles on the surface marked his progress, straight towards his target. That's it.
Damn. Scholz, what a guy.
What a guy, yeah.
Andy, I think maybe should we offer our semi-professional voice acting services to Jason if he needs like bad Australian accents in depth charge?
Here if you need. Here if you need. We can certainly give you some audio files.
I should crowdsource my accents. Actually, I hadn't thought about that. That could be a little logistically difficult, but I could do it. Yeah.
We'll make it happen.
You could do like the Heaton cut.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. All right. Well, it's exciting to hear that you'll be doing the audiobook yourself, because you are lovely to listen to, and I've seen in the comments people are very excited, and obviously you've got some devout fans of TGN.
Yeah.
Let's talk Turkey. When is Depth Charge out? How can we buy it, etc.?
So that's been another challenge, is kind of figuring out the logistics of selling the book. And so at this point, the book is in final proofreading. I've got a great proofreader. I had a great editor, Chris Wright from Gear Patrol days. I knew him, and he's just a fantastic editor. And then another Gear Patrol alum, Nick Milanis, is doing the proofreading, and he's going to be done here, he said, by Wednesday. So then it goes back to my designer, Paul, over in the UK, who's going to finish the typesetting. And I'm thinking I should be able to print by probably the end of next week. So my plan is, I was initially going to do all of the fulfillment myself, but looking at the shipping rates, and I got, I negotiated rates with FedEx for worldwide shipping, and even with those good rates, the book is going to be for sale for $14.99 US. To ship that to you guys, for instance, a book from here would cost like almost $30 additional. So, just silly, just dumb to try to approach it that way. So my plan was to keep back a few hundred copies here to send out signed copies to whoever really wants them. And I imagine those people will be in the US because it's shipping isn't exorbitant. And then I'm planning on selling worldwide on Amazon in both paperback and Kindle ebook versions.
Yeah, cool.
So I think at this point I'm shooting for the week of April 19th for launch, and I'm going to do a bit of a launch event on Instagram Live, so people can stay tuned to my Instagram and the Depth Charge Instagram for more news about that.
Yeah, I was going to ask about, like, I guess you can't really do a book tour at the moment, but Instagram Live, it seems like the very 2021 version. Maybe get on a Zoom as well.
A Clubhouse.
Zoom, Clubhouse, right?
Yeah, that'd work well for a book, obviously. And anything else, like, so I don't know what I'm even saying here. I was wondering if there are any other sort of cool things, like your Substack seems to have been part of the process of, like, I've seen the subscribers have got early glimpses, and is there any sort of plans to leverage that to do cool things with it?
Yeah, so I started my Substack newsletter last August, and that's been a fun weekly outlet for me to write, and they're, for people unfamiliar with Substack, it's this newsletter you can subscribe to, and non-paying subscribers get occasional posts, and then the people who pay at a certain level can read all of the posts every week, and they get it right in their inbox. And then as an additional sort of, I don't know if you call it enticement or reward for subscribing, for being a paying subscriber, I offered an early excerpt of the book. So I put a chapter up a few weeks ago for my paying subscribers, and then I'm also offering them early access to pre-order the book, or to order the book ahead of time, so they'll get it first, the signed copies. So that's another kind of perk that I've offered on Substack. But that's been a nice outlet, a nice way to build a bit of a buzz around the book too. And then I've also had an email list going from the Depth Charge website, which is depthchargenovel.com, and there's a sign up right on the homepage that you can sign up for a email list that I just have been sending out occasional updates about the book. So all different ways to connect with people. Yeah.
Well, we'll link up the newsletter and, of course, the Depth Charge website, and Felix will we'll have to put this out when we know that the book's ready for order on Amazon.
The Amazon links up too.
Oh, that'd be great.
Wait until it's live on Amazon.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that.
So I was also wondering, is this a possible future career? Do you think, like, I know it's early days, you haven't released it yet, but do you think you would do this more than your other writing? Like, has this sort of started a fire for an ongoing franchise character that eventually has his own Hollywood series?
Hollywood's a bit of that's everyone's dream, right? That's a bit of a stretch.
Netflix these days, probably.
Yeah, right. No, I'd love to. I'd love to make this a career. I'd love to do this going forward. Between doing TGN with James and doing the Substack weekly stuff, and then I've pretty much just plowed through this novel writing for the past year, almost full time. So it's I've done very little other work, freelance work for Hodinkee or for anybody else, and it's been great. I'd love to do this. We'll see how this one goes, and whether or not Gashani says, okay, pal, time to get back to some real work here. You've had your fun, But no, she's been really supportive, and I think she'd love to see nothing else than the film rights get sold, and then she can retire early too.
We'd love nothing more, and I'm sure Felix would love his ongoing syndication checks as well.
I assume I get first right for any acting roles for Scholz.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, nice.
Definitely.
Classic Scholz, always glancing at things with those eyes. Well, you mentioned watches, and obviously earlier said some of the inspiration that you've kind of had.
Yeah.
People like Clive Cussler and Ian Fleming, and who specifically included watches in their novels.
Yeah.
What can we expect on the watch front, given that a lot of your audience and subscribers and definitely ours are very into that category?
Yeah, it's been amazing. I've lost count of how many people have commented on posts on Instagram or whatever, saying I can't wait to hear about which watch is in the book, or what's on his wrist, or whatever. And I will say, I'm not going to give it away, but I will say that the watch that Tusker, the hero, wears is a watch very fitting for what he's doing, for his line of work. He's definitely a no nonsense. I wouldn't call him a strict watch guy, but he's definitely a hardcore diver who does it professionally. And so it's a watch in that stratus that is a watch that would be very fitting of someone who's working in the water every day. I'll also say that it was something that is a family heirloom, so it's something that was passed down to him. And that it plays a key but small role in the book. There's actually a scene involving the watch something happens. That
I bet Scholz tries to steal it. My prediction.
There are a few other watches. I will give away one. My arch villain, my psychopathic mercenary bad guy, wears I don't call it anything other than a big Rolex. I thought he's. It seemed fitting for the person he is.
The totally not based on any Swiss CEO's villain.
Jean-Fred Dufour. No,
Jean-Fred.
It's not Jean-Fred.
May,
right,
I don't know.
Right.
We'll miss you.
Let's not go any further. Otherwise,
my phone's ringing. The lawyers have.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But what about so? How did that process go? I know you're not going to tell us about the watch, but how did you sort of did you stress about it, or did you know quite early on what your character was going to wear?
It was a key piece. I mean, let's face it. I mean, the world I come from, the people I knew were going to be reading the book, I knew would be interested in it, and I wanted to make it not an obvious choice. I mean, I think to go with, say, a Doxa, which I think would be an equally fitting watch, and here's, I guess this is a giveaway. It's not a Doxa. I think that would just be, it's too Cussler. I mean, it's already owned by somebody. That's Dirk Pitt's watch, and there's no way I'm going to use that. It's not a Rolex. I'll say that as well. Just that would have also been would have been a good choice, but maybe a bit of an obvious choice. So I wanted to go with kind of a second tier watch that maybe would have been a popular choice by a previous generation of Tusker's family by another very serious diver. So we'll leave it there. But I did change the watch a few times over the history of writing the book.
Interesting.
He definitely had a different watch on when I started writing the book to what he finished with. But I think once
negotiating those brand deals.
Once I settled on the watch he wears, I think it kind of just clicked and it was like the right one. So
I mean, if it goes really well, you could get a limited edition. That'd be cool.
Yeah, that would be cool. Yeah,
fascinating.
Yeah. Hey, sky's the limit. I mean, in this brave new world, I mean, geez, who knows?
If Andy and I guess a brand each, will you blink once if we get it right and blink twice?
It's going to be a bit hard on audio, like when we can't see him.
Yeah, that's the whole point. I want to put one out there. I reckon he's going to wear a Girard-Perregaux.
Oh, I mean, how did you know? Of course.
I think it's going to be an Aquastar.
Oh, Aquastar. Interesting.
Yeah. I think it's an Aquastar.
And obviously,
you can't see me blinking.
Those eyelashes flutter.
Yep. Obviously, you're obviously not just into watches. Anyone that is familiar with your Instagram knows that defenders and dive gear and all sorts of material culture is something that you're sort of quite particular about. And even in that reading before, we've got some name checked brands and some specific thicknesses of wetsuits and all that sort of stuff. Is this?
Yeah.
Will this be? Did every other sort of product category have the same level of care taken as the hero's watch?
I think so. One thing I loved about Ian Fleming's James Bond novels is that he paid such close attention to detail and to brands and to even specific vintages of champagne or the gearbox or the I recall the Bentley that Bond drives in a few of the books. He specifically mentions Marshall driving lights on the front of the car, and Red Grant, the villain in From Russia with Love, wears a Girard-Perregaux watch, and he mentions that it has all sorts of complications on it. It's kind of the watch that a very gauche, guy would wear or something, and so he's very specific, and I think that lends credibility to the story. I think it if the reader doesn't know what those specific things are, you want to look it up, or I do. I'm that kind of reader, so I want to know what Marshall lights look like on a Bentley, and so I tend to go down those rabbit holes when I read books like that. Whereas if that stuff's kind of glossed over and it's not mentioned, I feel like it's not as rich of a story. So I really made a point of kind of following his lead in that respect. He goes into specifics about the weapons that Bond uses or the cars he drives and things. And I really wanted to kind of stay true to that. So,
yeah, I think it adds authenticity. I think is a good way of
I think so
of sort of thing here.
Yeah.
Well, I for one cannot wait to read Depth Charge, notably because I want to know what my doppelganger gets up to. Hopefully nothing too henchman-like. But there's other stuff going on in the world at the moment. And one thing that I wanted to sort of mention to you or get your take on, because it's been on your Substack and I've seen it around a bit, is that Synchron watch. What's the story there and what's going on? Why does it look like a Doxer? Please explain.
So the backstory is there's a guy named Rick Marai, who you probably know, and people in the watch world know him. He had kind of revived the Doxa sub diving watch line for Doxa back in, I think, the late 90s, early 2000s. And so he was working with the Yenny family, which owns the Doxa name now. And back then he convinced them, hey, let's bring back the Doxa dive watches. They're the coolest of the whole brand. And so when he did that, no Swiss brand at the time was selling watches online. And Rick had this idea, let's sell these watches online. So he did. And they were a big success up until a couple of years ago. He parted ways with Doxa. And in the meantime, Rick had already owned the rights to the name Synchron, which was an old watch conglomerate kind of along the lines of a Swatch Group or Kering Group or whatever back in the 60s and 70s. And Synchron, ironically, back then used to own Doxa and Eberhard and some other Borel and some other brands. So under the Synchron name in the past 10 years or so, Rick has he started up Tropic watch straps and Isofrane watch straps and Aquadive and most recently Aquastar, and kind of put those under the Synchron umbrella. And I think when he left Doxa, he still had this desire. There was like unfinished business. Like he'd done it all. Like he'd done the T-Graph and he'd done the Sub 300 and all these watches. But I think he always had this desire to do the Army, which was a Doxa that was made in very limited numbers back in the early 70s. And, I don't know if it was him thumbing his nose at his former bosses or what, but he just decided, hey, I've got the wherewithal and the resources, and I'm gonna make this watch. And so he did it in just two color versions. There's the black case with a slightly different dial that was kind of more true to the original, and then a regular kind of naked stainless steel case that he sold 250 of each, and they've sold out. I think the steel one sold out. I'm not sure about the black one at this point, but it was a bit of a kerfuffle because the day he sent out the email, like I woke up the next morning and my direct message box on Instagram was just full of messages from people saying, "Did you see this? Did you see this?" And Doxa had put up kind of their own image of kind of a grainy photo of one of their old Army watches, saying, only trust the original. Ours is coming soon. It just became this sort of almost comical, playground like, war of words or whatever being flung around. And,
hey, we're talking about it.
Yeah, exactly. So, no publicity is bad publicity. I don't know. I'm sure Doxa will come out with their own as they've promised, and it'll be just fine. And everyone will be happy and have their watches on their wrists. But it's always funny to see, how serious people take this stuff and get kind of entrenched in their brand loyalties and stuff these days. But it's a cool watch. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks really cool. Which would you take, the black kind of DLC coating or the stainless steel?
I've never warmed up to black case watches. I think it looks as good as it can on this watch, but I'm pretty much a kind of a steel guy. I'm trying to think of a black cased watch that I would see myself wearing regularly, and I just don't. I always would opt for something different. I don't know. What about you guys? What do you prefer? Black? Do you own any black watches?
I've had a few, but I'm like you. I always think of the scratches and stuff, and I think I'm pretty conservative and stick with steel. But that black doesn't look
I
cool.
kind of like that. I think I'd be happy. I'd be happy kind of getting a DLC coated watch and then having it kind of scuff up over time.
Yeah.
Yeah, you really pushed me to get the black watch when I got this Bremont, Andy. You were like, get the black one, get the black one, get the black one. I'm like, nah.
Which watch is that? Do you have a black Bremont?
No, I've got no, Andy wanted me to get a black Bremont, but I have a regular steel, the MB2 with the new white dial.
Oh, yeah, that's a great watch.
And I kept saying to him, like, if you're going to do the custom thing, then take it all the way. Get DLC coded. They're doing it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But no.
I had a U2 with the blue dial years ago with the black case, and it didn't stick. I love their 2 Crown watches. I have an MB2 with the white dial myself, and
nice.
I just the black case just didn't stick. And yet, whenever I see other people wearing black watches, I'm like, I kind of want one. The CWC makes this SBS diver, and you get those old, really patinaed like Orfina portrait design chronographs from like the Top Gun movie, and these watches where they kind of scuff a little bit, and they just look so good. But
like a black scuffed bezel is a cool thing. Yeah. Now, Jason, you've done this before, so you know what I'm going to ask next. Where the time has come to wrap, I believe. So I want to know what you would suggest someone else listening to this read, watch, listen to. Any sort of inspirational thrillers to get them in the mood for depth charge?
Well, I've got a friend in the UK. He's a British writer, Hugh Francis Anderson, who wrote to me recently about this expedition that he's planning, and I don't want to give it away because I don't know if he's got secret plans for it, but it involves some sailing and some mountain climbing. And coincidentally, I had gotten a book recently that was a republished edition of a book called The Sea and the Snow by Philip Temple. And this is nonfiction, so sorry, it isn't a thriller. But it's a fantastic story, and it's about this Australian expedition where in 1965 or 66, where they sailed a boat from Sydney to what's the name of the island? Do you know where the Kerguelen Islands are? They're French islands in the very close to Antarctica, so in the Southern Ocean there.
Yeah. Okay.
And there's an island close to that, an uninhabited island that I believe belongs to Australia called Heard Island, yes. Heard.
Yeah.
And there's a peak on it. There's an extinct volcano on it called Mawson Peak. And these guys sailed from Sydney there over, 2,000 miles or 3,000 miles or something across the open Southern Ocean and then proceed to climb this peak. And I'm almost done with the book now, but it's a fantastic story. I love old adventure stories from the 60s and the 70s because I think that was kind of that era when, things were still a bit on the edge, but modern enough that you can, they were still taking good photos and the storytelling is good. It doesn't feel like you're reading about old timey stuff like, Shackleton or Robert Scott or something like that. These guys were out there, and they're drinking beer and they're doing this and that, but it's a rollicking adventure. And I believe the publisher is Lodestar Books. I actually ordered it from Australia, and it took a few weeks to get here. But it's a fantastic book, and there is a bit of a watch tie-in because I always look. I think a lot of people like to look for watches in movies or on TV shows, and they'll pause the Blu-ray or the show or something, and they'll like squint and try to figure out what watch so and so is wearing. And I think these old books. These guys were wearing watches because they were tools. At that time they wore them. And in this book, in the back, in the appendix, it says, thanks to all of our sponsors and providers. And the watch provider for this expedition was Mito.
Yeah. Right.
Which, interesting choice. I wouldn't have expected. But so now I'm like this is very geeky, but I'm like using a loop and like looking at these black and white photos of like these guys, sitting on the sailboat or in their climbing gear. And I'm looking at these white dialed watches on their wrists and trying to think like which Mito are they wearing?
So have you worked it out yet? Are they the very Rolexy looking ones?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm not that familiar with Mito, and especially with their historical pieces.
Yeah, they're pretty big around that time. They were a pretty popular brand in the 60s. So I've had it. Yeah. So that was pretty cool. So the Sea and the Snow. If you want some good
a bit of an amuse-bouche for depth charge and read some thrillers. I mean, I really highly recommend. Everybody's watched all the Bond films, but I think just read any of the Fleming novels. I think my favorite is probably Moonraker.
Yep.
Which is strange because it was probably the worst movie, but it's a great. I think it was Fleming's greatest Bond novel. I think it's fantastic.
Do you mind, Andy, if I go off script? I've actually got a recommendation that's very much in keeping with this.
You do,
yeah. Well, I would recommend everyone. I watched it a while ago after we interviewed Charlie Borman, and he mentioned it. Where Eagles Dare.
Oh yeah,
that's a great movie and a great
one.
book, and very much in keeping with the vibe of I'm hoping of yours. So lots of alpine adventures and
yeah. I've been on a bit of a I was trying to kind of get in the mood as I was writing to kind of bone up on my thriller reading, and I read a few of Alistair MacLean's novels. I finished most recently, I think it was When Eight Bells Toll, which was one of Anthony Hopkins' first movie roles. Actually, he was in the movie version of it, which was a decent movie. I would recommend.
Check it out. Can't go wrong. Ice Station Zebra next. It's
sure.
Classic, Andy, classic.
Yeah.
Love it.
Anyway, that's my recommendation. Just throwing that out there.
Love it. Yeah.
Awesome. Jason Heaton, thank you so much for joining us. We'll link everything up, and everyone needs to make sure they get a copy of Depth Charge.
Yeah, congratulations. Yeah. What's the best way to get it? What ways should people go through Amazon or directly through you? What gets you the most dollars?
Well, I think Amazon's going to be the way to go for somebody anywhere other than the U.S. simply due to the exorbitant shipping costs. So I will definitely put all this info on my Instagram and on the depthcharge_novel on Instagram, and then depthchargenovel.com if you want to sign up for the email list. I can send updates there. But yeah, keep an eye on my Instagram, and then the depthchargenovel.com will have the shop link when it's live and when the books are ready for anyone that wants a signed copy and wants to pay for that shipping. So appreciate the time, guys. I mean, it's always fun to talk to you, but also I really appreciate your giving me the chance to talk about the book.
Our pleasure.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks. All right. Bye, guys.
Well, Felix, that was awesome to chat to Jason. I'm actually so excited for our copies to arrive, and I wonder, we're recording this on Sunday. This is going live on Friday. I wonder if we're going to have the book by the time this goes live. I really hope it does, because he's FedExed it, so it should be quite quick. Yeah. I'm excited to see what happens. I'm excited to see what watch Evil, that famously evil henchman Scholz wears.
I'm excited to see what happens to henchman.
I'm excited to see the comments as well. I want to see what people suggest for you.
I'm worried I'm going to be dragged pretty hard on this.
Is this fiction, by the way? I don't know. Like, if it was fiction, why would you use real names?
Well, I mean, I got nothing. Series. But honestly, thank you so much, Jason. It's been really great to sort of, see through the journey of this. Like, we've sort of, chatted over the years, or the year, I suppose, that he's been writing it mostly, and really cool to see this project come alive and do more than, air quotes, just watches. Well done. Congratulations. And of course, follow Jason Heaton, depthcharge_novel. Head to his website. Andy, what's his website again? You know it better than I do.
depthchargenovel.com.
Nice. And thank you, Jason, for coming on. Thank you, WatchBox, and thank you, Mike, for that fascinating market wrap, exclusive, I suppose. Yeah. What else, Andy? Who else do we need to thank? Is there anyone?
Yeah, just again reiterating how proud we are of Jason Heaton, because this is, I think it's been a year and a half from what I've seen. So it's really cool to see, to kind of create things. A lot of people talk about doing things, and of course, thank you to everyone for listening. Thank you to everyone for emailing us, otthepodcast@gmail.com.
Yep.
Hitting our Instagram, we've already mentioned, so that's cool. And yeah, thanks for the reviews and telling your friends about the show. We love it, and we'll be back next week.
Don't forget, you can win a copy as well.
Yep. Instagram.
Yep. Any question? Here's a hint for anyone listening this far at the end. If you say Felix is not evil, but he would wear ... you're gonna go to the next tier. It's a little Easter egg for the regular listeners.
The lawyers are going to be very upset with that. All right. Well, we'll see you guys next week.